Beautiful plants with low maintenance requirements and varieties to suit all gardens. Ferns are something you will absolutely enjoy growing. In the ornamental plant series, today we will look at growing ferns. They come in a lot of different varieties, and in your local garden center you can see a lot of different varieties of ferns that you can pick up for growing in your home garden. And there are a lot of fern varieties, over hundreds of thousands of varieties that you will find. However, I will go over two of the most common varieties and the most beautiful varieties in my opinion in today's episode. They are abundantly found in nature. Here you can see a couple of photos from the Redwood National Park. And let's now jump into the first fern variety, which is Asparagus Fern. This is a beautiful looking fern variety with beautiful leaves, as you can see here, and they can be shaped to almost any size you want or any shape you want. Just like all other ferns, they love shade and they produce these nice green leaves, and the only maintenance they really require is pruning, and as I mentioned, you can shape them into any form that you want. And we will talk in more detail when we look at our next fern variety, which is the foxtail fern, which is another very popular fern variety that you can easily find in almost any gardening store. And since the leaves look like the tail of a fox, it gets its name, the foxtail fern. And as you can see here, this is a beautiful looking fern variety. The one that you're seeing right here has a little bit of yellow leaves, and ferns are shade loving plants. So even with the slightest sunlight, you will see that some of the leaves turn yellow, and that is why it's recommended that you grow ferns in shade or partial shade at least. And let's look at the watering requirements now. Most ferns like moist and humid conditions, so don't let your fern plants dry out. Just make sure they're on a good drip irrigation schedule, and that way they can produce the best leaves. If you have weeds growing around your fern plant, make sure that you remove those weeds because they will compete for water and nutrients. And since you water your fern plants a lot, you can see weeds like clover growing around your plant like you see here. So just make sure you remove all the weeds around your plant, and then your plant will stay healthy. Ferns prefer a soil that is loose and rich with organic matter. They don't really need a lot of fertilizer, but if you want healthy plants and you want nice green leaves on your fern plant, then you can use either of these two fertilizers. You need to use a high nitrogen fertilizer for good leaf growth. So if you're using an organic fertilizer, you can use blood meal, which is high in nitrogen. And if you like to use salt-based fertilizers, you can use a high nitrogen fertilizer like the one you see on your screen here, or any all-purpose fertilizer. So the maintenance that you need to do for all fern plants is pruning the dead leaves. The fern leaves will dry and become yellow and brown, so you need to remove them to preserve good aesthetics for your plant. And just by doing that and by regular watering, you can have beautiful fern plants that will adorn your garden. And as far as insects and diseases go, the fern plants are relatively maintenance free. There are not a lot of insects that attack the fern plant. The only exception may be slugs and snails, which try to make holes in some of the fern leaves. But unless you're growing large fern leaves like the Australian fern, you won't really see a slug problem in your fern plants as well. Check out my video on controlling snails and slugs to control them in your home garden. Now, fern plants do require repotting when you're growing them in containers, and they do get very root bound, as you can see here. The roots are pretty interesting. They have these rounded kind of tubules on the end of their roots, and they do get root bound very quickly. So I recommend that you repot your fern plant at least every 2 years for optimal growth. So there we have it, folks. Let me know if you like this episode. It's a break from growing all the edibles that I've been posting for the last few years. And if you like me to post more videos on ornamental plants or flowering plants, do put in your comments below. And I would also like to know if you grow ferns in your garden. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.